If you love heart-touching survival stories, make sure to subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts below. Your support keeps these miracles alive. The wind was howling like a lost soul. It screamed across the frozen wastelands of the Arctic, sweeping snow in violent waves that stung like needles. The sky above was an endless gray sheet, no sun, no warmth, just an unforgiving cold that could freeze the soul of even the strongest. Beneath that cruel sky, a small shape moved slowly, almost too slowly. Barely visible in the swirling snow, a tiny white figure limped across the endless white, no bigger than a toddler. A polar bear cub. Alone. Its paws, made for padding through deep snow, trembled with every step. The soft pads were cracked, bleeding in places. The thick fur that once kept it warm now clung to its frail body, soaked and crusted with ice. Its ribs showed through the fluff, each breath a struggle, like a whisper fighting to stay alive. And its eyes, God, those eyes, were wide and lost. Full of confusion. Full of fear. Full of silent, desperate hope. The little cub had been alone for 2 days now. 2 endless days since the ice broke beneath its mother's feet. One moment she was guiding it across the floe, sniffing the air, her massive body shielding the little one from the cold wind, and the next there was only the sound of cracking. Then a splash. Then silence. The cub cried for hours. Cried until its voice faded into hoarse breaths. No answer came. No shadow in the distance. No mother. Nothing. Just the storm. Now, with its tiny legs barely moving, it wandered. It didn't know why. Only that it had to. That something inside it, maybe instinct, maybe hope, told it to keep going. The snow kept falling heavier now. The wind roared louder. Each time the cub paused, its body swayed like it might just fall over and give up. But it didn't. It dragged itself forward, sniffing the air, eyes blinking against the wind. It didn't know it was heading toward a danger worse than the cold. Than ice. With each tiny step, the fragile sheet beneath its feet groaned. Hairline cracks spidered out from under its paws, but it didn't hear them. The wind was too loud. Its breathing too shallow. It was just walking, hoping to smell her again, to see her again. Suddenly, it slipped. One paw slid forward and it fell onto its side, letting out a weak, raspy whimper. Not a roar. Not a cry. Just a sound like breath being stolen. The cold bit deeper now. Lying down made it worse. It started to shiver uncontrollably. The kind of shiver that means the body is giving up the fight. The cub lay there for minutes. Maybe more. Snow piled over its back, like a slow, frozen blanket trying to bury it alive. Somewhere deep inside, something still flickered. It rolled, ever so slightly, to its stomach and tried to lift itself. One paw pushed, then the other. It stood. Shaking, slow, swaying, but standing. Its nose lifted to the air. A scent. Faint. Strange. Not its mother. Not a bear. Something else, warm? It didn't know that miles away, past the jagged cliffs and snowbanks, a small Arctic research station sat quietly. Inside, a man sat alone, staring out the frosted window, sipping lukewarm coffee. He didn't know yet that a miracle was dragging itself through the storm, straight toward him. But we're not there yet. The cub kept moving, one slow step at a time. Its stomach growled so loudly it startled a nearby snowbird, which fluttered up into the sky, disappearing like a ghost. The cub flinched, then lowered its head and kept going. The ice creaked again beneath its weight. This time it stopped. Instinct told it this sound was different, closer, sharper. It looked down. Tiny black lines were forming beneath its paws, growing fast. The ice was tired. Just like the cub. A single loud crack echoed into the sky. The cub leapt. Its paws landed inches away from a forming hole and the ice held. Barely. It didn't know it, but that small jump saved its life. It walked on. Hours passed. The light dimmed. Not that there was much light to begin with, but now even the dull gray was slipping into blue shadow. Arctic night was approaching. And night meant one thing for the cub. The end. It was too weak to make it through another night. The cold would win. The wind would win. Unless... The cub paused. Ahead, through the wall of white, something dark stood out. A shape. So solid. Tall. It squinted. It was too blurry to see clearly, but it looked like a rock? No. Moved. A figure. And for the first time in 2 days, something stirred in the cub's heart. Something warmer than fear, deeper than instinct. Could it be help? But its legs gave out. And the cub collapsed face first into the snow, breath shallow, heart slowing. Only the wind moved now. Only the storm roared. But not for long. Because help was closer than it knew. The world was getting quieter. Not because the storm had stopped. No, the wind still screamed across the Arctic, furious and relentless. Snow still whipped through the air like shattered glass. But inside the cub, silence was spreading. The kind of silence that comes before the end. Its tiny heart beat slowly, faintly, each thump weaker than the last. Its breath barely lifted the snowflakes resting on its nose. It lay still in the snow, halfway between death and a miracle. Then from the white blur ahead, a sound. Crunch. Not the wind. Not the cracking of ice. Something softer. Steadier. Human. Boots. The cub didn't know what boots were. But its ears twitched. Its body, though numb and weak, tried to respond. Just a flick of the ear. A tiny movement. But it meant life was still there. In the distance the man saw it. At first he thought it was just a mound of snow, maybe a strange lump of ice. But something felt off. He lowered his binoculars, rubbed the frost from the lenses and looked again. A shape. Too round. Too soft. Too alive. Wait a minute. His voice cracked the silence inside the station, almost shocking himself. He hadn't spoken in hours. He grabbed his coat, threw on his thick fur-lined gloves and rushed out into the storm. The temperature outside hit him like a punch. -43 degrees. Wind chill worse. But he didn't care. Something was out there. Something alive. Each step toward the cub felt like a mile. Snow pushed against him like a wall, and visibility was so bad he could barely see 10 feet ahead. But he kept walking, guided only by memory and gut instinct. Meanwhile, the cub tried to lift its head. It didn't succeed. Its muscles had stopped listening. His body was too cold. Hunger gnawed at its insides, now dull, now distant. It didn't even hurt anymore. That was the scariest part. When pain stops, sometimes, so does life. But then, a scent. Different from snow. Different from ice. Something strange. A kind of warmth. Not meat. Not blood. Just, not cold. It blinked once, slowly. Closer now, the man's eyes locked on the small, nearly buried figure. He dropped to his knees. Oh my God. It was a cub. No mother in sight. Ribs showing. Muzzle frozen. Paws bleeding. He reached out gently, his glove brushing against the fur. The cub flinched. Still alive. Hey there, little one, he whispered, though he knew the cub couldn't understand. It's okay. I've got you. But he didn't. Not yet. The moment his hand touched the cub again, the ice beneath them let out a deep, thunderous groan. Crack. His blood turned to ice. He looked down. They were standing on a spiderweb of fractures, thin ice. Black lines spread fast like ink on paper. The cub had collapsed right near a melt pool. One wrong move and both would fall in. The man didn't move. He froze, not from the cold but from pure terror. The cub, sensing his tension, gave a weak whimper. He had to think. Fast. Every second counted now. If he turned and ran, the ice might hold under his weight. But that meant leaving the cub. And there was no guarantee he could come back in time. Not with the weather getting worse. And if he stayed, the ice might collapse. He looked at the cub, this tiny, fragile life clinging to existence. A creature born into a world melting beneath its feet, suffering for no reason but being born too late, on a planet too warm. He couldn't walk away. So he made a choice. Very slowly, with the caution of a man stepping through glass, he lay flat on the ice. Spread his weight evenly. Reached both arms toward the cub. I'm not leaving you, he whispered. Not today. He scooped the cub into his arms. It was barely conscious. The weight was nothing, like holding a bag of feathers. But it felt heavy with meaning. Now came the hard part. Getting back. With the cub bundled inside his coat, sharing his body heat, he crawled inch by inch back across the cracking ice. His breath fogged his goggles. His gloves froze to the surface. Every shift of weight made the ice groan. And then, boom. A sheet behind him cracked and fell into the water. Freezing Arctic sea swallowed the spot they had just left. He didn't look back. Just crawled faster. The snow blasted sideways. Time lost all meaning. All he knew was that every second he delayed, the cub slipped closer to the edge. Finally, solid ground. He stood up, legs shaking, body screaming, and ran the last stretch to the station. He burst inside, slammed the door behind him, and collapsed on the floor, panting. The cub lay limp in his coat. Was it breathing? He rushed to the table, pulled out a thermal blanket, wrapped it tight. He turned on the emergency heater. He placed a bottle of warm water near its belly. Did everything he could remember from years of wildlife rescue training. And waited. 10 seconds. 20. A minute. No movement. His eyes filled with tears. He touched the cub's face gently. "Come on, little one," he whispered. "Please?" Then a twitch. The cub's ear moved. Then its paw. Then a soft breath. And the faintest sound, a tiny rasping cry. The man let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. It wasn't over. But it wasn't safe either. Outside, the storm raged harder. The temperature dropped lower. Inside, a fragile life had been pulled back from the edge. But the danger had only just begun. Because in the dark corners of that white world, predators were always watching. And not all of them walked on four legs. For the first time in 2 days, the world felt still. Inside the dimly lit research station, the blizzard was now just a dull roar outside, like the distant sound of an angry ocean. The walls creaked under the weight of the storm, but inside there was warmth. There was breath. There was life. The cub lay curled under layers of emergency blankets, its small body still shivering despite the growing heat. Steam from the heater fogged the nearby window, making the outside world disappear into white. But here, in this small corner of the Arctic, something impossible was happening. The man, his name was Daniel, sat nearby watching. Every few minutes he adjusted the bottle of warm water pressed gently to the cub's side, careful not to burn or chill it too much. He'd changed out of his soaked outerwear, now wrapped in a thick flannel blanket, his boots steaming near the small portable heater. He hadn't spoken to another human in 10 days. But now he couldn't stop talking. Quietly. Gently. "I know you're scared," he whispered. "I'd be scared too. Everything around you's cold. Loud. Gone." His eyes softened as he looked at the cub's tiny paws twitch in its sleep. "You lost her, didn't you?" The cub stirred slightly. Not from his words, but from something deeper. Body warming, breath steadying, life slowly returning to the places it had started to leave. Daniel sat back and ran his fingers through his hair. He still couldn't believe it. A lone cub out there in this weather, still breathing? It was nothing short of a miracle. But he knew better. This wasn't just luck. This was nature's fight to hold on. And now it was his fight too. By the next morning, the cub's eyes opened fully. Wide, dark, unsure. It didn't move right away. Just blinked. Then sniffed the air. Daniel sat still. He knew better than to approach too quickly. Even a half-dead cub could react in fear. And fear could break the fragile bond they'd barely begun to form. "It's okay," he whispered. "I won't hurt you." The cub's nose twitched. It looked at him. Really looked. Not the way a predator looks at prey. Not the way an animal looks at a threat. But with a soft, almost childlike confusion. "Who are you? Where am I? Where is she?" Daniel didn't move. He just held his hand out, gloved still, fingers open. No sudden movements. Just presence. The cub looked at it. Sniffed the air. But didn't reach. Not yet. Instead, it slowly lowered its head onto the blanket and let out a small exhale, like surrender. Not fear. Not comfort either. Just exhaustion. And that was enough for Daniel. Progress. Over the next few hours, he warmed up a small amount of formula. He knew it wouldn't be enough, not for a creature this big, but it was better than nothing. Through a syringe, drop by drop, he fed it while it lay still, eyes half closed. The cub didn't fight. Didn't bite. Just drank. Every drop was a victory. By evening it tried to stand. Its legs trembled, weak as paper, but it managed to lift its head and shift onto its belly. A soft grunt escaped its throat. A sign of will. Daniel smiled. "You're a tough little fighter," he said. "I see you." The cub didn't understand the words. But something in the tone, maybe it did understand that. Night fell again. Outside, the storm lessened, but the cold deepened. Temperatures dropped to deadly levels. The kind of cold that doesn't just freeze skin, it freezes time. Inside, Daniel set up a sleeping bag near the cub's corner, separated only by a low table and 2 metal chairs. He kept the heater running, checked the battery backups, and even gave up his extra blanket to lay it under the cub's side. "You need it more than I do," he said with a soft smile. He lay on his side, watching the small rise and fall of the cub's breath, until sleep took him. In the middle of the night, something woke him. A sound. Not the storm. Not ice cracking. A whimper? He sat up. The cub was awake. Standing now, wobbling but standing. Its head turned slowly, looking toward the small gap in the cabin wall where wind whistled faintly through the cracks. It sniffed the air again, ears twitching. Then, a sound escaped its throat. A soft, low call. Daniel blinked. It wasn't random. It wasn't pain. It was calling out. "Is that what you used to do for her?" he whispered. "That same sound?" The cub let out the same sound again, weaker this time. Then it looked at Daniel. And for the first time it didn't look afraid. Looked connected. The next morning brought clear skies. A rare gift in the Arctic. Daniel used the chance to go out and check the area, using a snowmobile to ride along the ice shelf in case there were other signs, footprints, remains, tracks. He scanned for signs of the cub's mother. Hope burned quietly inside him. But he found nothing. Just snow. Just silence. Just the vast, empty Arctic stretching endlessly in every direction. When he returned, the cub was sitting up. Waiting. When he entered, it didn't run or growl. It stayed. Its eyes met his. And in that shared silence, trust was born. The next few days passed like fragile miracles. The cub regained strength slowly. It started walking inside the station, sniffing corners, brushing against Daniel's boots without fear. Daniel laughed the first time it nudged his leg with its nose. "You trying to say thanks?" he chuckled. "You're welcome." They were an odd pair. A lonely man with too many ghosts, and a cub who'd lost everything before it even knew what it had. But they found something in each other. Something rare. Something real. Still, Daniel knew the clock was ticking. The cub couldn't stay here forever. It needed space, care, proper rescue. And he wasn't sure how long he could keep it safe out here, not with what was coming. Because outside the ice was thinning. And somewhere in that vast white silence, something else had caught the scent. Something hungry. Something moving. Something that didn't come to rescue but to take. The Arctic is beautiful. But never be fooled. Behind the beauty lies something older than time, something cruel, cold, and hungry. It had been 5 days since Daniel found the cub. And in those 5 days something inside him had changed. He spoke more. Laughed sometimes. He even started whistling quietly as he heated formula over his tiny propane stove. The cub, whom he'd started calling Hope, was now strong enough to walk properly. It followed Daniel around the station like a silent shadow. It didn't play, didn't growl, didn't purr. But it stayed. And for Daniel that was enough. Every time he looked into Hope's eyes, something stirred in his chest, something he thought he'd buried years ago. Something that reminded him of his daughter. She would have been 5 this year. He never spoke of it. Not even to himself. But when he touched Hope's fur, when he heard those soft grunts, he didn't feel alone anymore. But even warmth cannot stop what's coming. Not in the Arctic. Not in April. That morning the wind died. It wasn't normal. The Arctic never goes completely quiet. There's always some sound, distant cracking, shifting snow, howling breeze. But now, nothing. Daniel stepped outside to check the sky. Pale gray clouds hung low over the ice. Not a single snowflake fell. Not a single breeze stirred. Stillness. A strange, eerie kind. His boots crunched softly on the hardened ice. Hope stayed behind inside the station, staring out through the window. Then Daniel saw something. Tracks. Fresh ones. Big ones. He crouched. Claw marks. Wide apart. Something heavy. Not bear. These were wolf tracks. But not just one. At least 5. They circled near the back of the station, then disappeared into the ridge line. As if watching. Daniel's stomach dropped. Wolves this far north? This early in spring? Desperation. The storm had driven them off their usual path. Food was scarce. The scent of the cub must have traveled farther than he realized. He hurried back inside. Hope tilted her head at him, sensing his tension. Her ears twitched. She let out a soft, questioning grunt. "It's okay," Daniel lied. But his eyes said otherwise. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He reinforced the doors. Stacked extra crates against the windows. Loaded the flare gun. Charged his old radio and scanned all channels for a rescue team or ranger patrol. Nothing. He turned off all lights and sat near the window watching the moonlit snow outside. At 2:13 a.m. he heard it. A low howl. Then another. Closer. Hope woke with a jolt. She stood, fur bristling, and looked at Daniel with panic. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her back. "I won't let them take you," he whispered. And he meant it. The first attack came fast. 3 shadows appeared near the snowmobile, figures moving low and silent. One broke off and darted toward the station's side door. Daniel grabbed the flare gun. He aimed through the small opening and fired. Boom. A blinding red light exploded across the snow, sending the wolves scattering. Their glowing eyes caught the light for a split second before vanishing into the dark. Hope let out a sharp cry, backing into the corner. "It's okay," Daniel whispered again, sweat running down his back despite the cold. But they both knew. That was just the beginning. The next few hours were a standoff. Every few minutes, another howl. Closer. A scratch at the wall. A paw against the window. Then silence again. At dawn, Daniel knew they had to leave. Hope couldn't survive another night like this. And he couldn't protect her alone. But outside, the wolves waited. He made a decision. One final act. He packed the cub inside a metal transport cage lined with his best blankets. Attached it to the back of his snowmobile. Tied everything down. Loaded the flare gun with his last 2 shots. Then he looked at her, really looked. She stared back. Quiet. Trusting. He placed his hand against the cage bars. "You're going to be okay," he said softly. "I promise." And then, as he reached for the ignition, snap. A shadow leapt from the side. One of the wolves had climbed the roof. It crashed down onto the snowmobile, snarling. Daniel reacted on instinct. He shoved the snowmobile forward, sending it gliding across the ice toward the open field. Hope's cage rocked dangerously but stayed tied. Then Daniel turned. The wolf lunged. He raised the flare gun and fired. Blast. The sky lit red. The wolf yelped and fell back, but more followed. Daniel yelled, arms wide, running toward the trees, away from the cub. They chased him. He didn't look back. Didn't stop. Not when claws scraped his shoulder. Not when ice cracked beneath his feet. He just ran, led them away deeper into the wild until they were all gone. Silence returned. Hours passed. The snowmobile sat still at the field's edge. Inside the cage, Hope huddled, safe. But Daniel. He didn't return. Not that day. Not the next. Only silence. And paw prints. 3 days later, a rescue team found the snowmobile. Found the cub. Alive. Cold. Shaken. Hungry. But alive. They followed the tracks. Found pieces of torn fabric. Blood stains. A boot. But not him. No body. Just empty white and silence. Hope was taken to a sanctuary in northern Canada. They called her Miracle. But to the rescuers she was a symbol. A reminder. Of someone they never found, but whose sacrifice gave life to something precious. Because somewhere in the Arctic, a man had made a choice. And a fragile heartbeat kept beating. Against all odds. This is where pain turns into purpose, where the story becomes more than just survival. It becomes a quiet revolution of the heart. Weeks passed. Then months. And slowly the world moved on. But in a quiet sanctuary tucked in the snowy hills of Manitoba, one small life continued its journey, unaware of just how many hearts it would soon touch. They called her Miracle. And for good reason. She shouldn't have survived. Not out there. Not alone. Not in that storm. But somehow, she did. Every breath she took now was a whisper of resistance. Every blink, every movement, every heartbeat. Proof that even in the coldest places something warm can still hold on. Hope didn't just survive. She began to grow. At first she didn't let anyone near her. The caretaker stayed behind the fences, watching her quietly as she sniffed the air and paced slowly across her enclosure. Her paws were still tender. Her steps hesitant. But her eyes had changed. She wasn't just afraid anymore. She was looking for something. Or someone. Among the staff was a woman named Rachel, a biologist with silver strands in her hair and calm in her voice. She had seen dozens of rescues over the years. But none like this. "There's something about her," she whispered one evening, watching Hope sit perfectly still at the edge of the ice pond. "It's like, she's waiting." The other staff nodded politely. But Rachel saw something deeper. One day, after weeks of quiet observation, Rachel stepped closer to the edge of the enclosure and sat cross-legged just beyond the gate. She didn't say anything. She just sat. Minutes passed. Then hours. And finally, Hope turned her head. Rachel held her breath. The cub stood. Walked forward slowly. Then stopped just a few feet away. Their eyes met. For a second, time stopped. Rachel whispered, "Did someone love you?" Hope blinked. And then, for the first time since she'd arrived, she stepped forward. Not much. Just enough to reach Rachel's gloved fingers through the fence. A soft nudge. A silent yes. From that day on, everything changed. Hope became more active. She began to play, chasing fish under the ice pond, rolling in the snow, even splashing water at startled interns. She didn't just exist. She lived. And with every playful step, every joyful leap, the story of her survival spread beyond the walls of the sanctuary. It reached schools, homes, newsrooms, social media. Millions watched her first swim, her first roar, her first time curling up in the snow, peaceful and safe. And behind every smile, behind every shared video or comment or tear, there was a quiet question. who saved her. The researchers never found his body. Only his pack torn open, a broken radio, and a worn notebook. Inside, one sentence scrawled hastily on the last page. If she lives, that's all I need. That was all. No name. No backstory. Just a man who gave everything for a creature who couldn't even say thank you. But she remembered. She knew. Rachel believed that with all her heart. I see it in her eyes, she said softly. Every time it snows, she waits at the edge of the enclosure. Like she thinks he'll come walking out of the white. And maybe, in a way he does. Because in that sanctuary, every heartbeat of that cub is a memory, a prayer, a promise. One winter evening, Rachel gave a talk at a climate conference. She stood on stage with a picture of hope behind her, young, strong, glowing in the golden light of the Arctic sun. She was never supposed to make it, Rachel said to the room full of scientists and activists. But someone out there chose to believe one fragile life was worth saving, even when no one was watching. She paused, voice steady. And that's the lesson here. Not about polar bears. Not even about climate change. She looked up. It's about kindness. The room went silent. She let it stay that way for a while. Then she added, we live in a world where ice is melting. Where storms are louder. Where nature screams for help in ways we pretend not to hear. But someone out there, someone with no camera, no audience, heard a silent cry. Rachel's hand trembled slightly as she clicked to the next slide. The cub, curled up in a blanket, safe in the research station, eyes closed. And that changed everything. Outside, the snow began to fall again. Gentle. Soft. Hope sat at the edge of her enclosure, looking toward the trees. The staff called her in for food. She ignored them. She just stared at the white beyond the fence. Listening. Waiting. Remembering. There are stories that leave you in awe. And there are stories that change your heart. This one is both. A polar bear cub who should have died. A man who refused to let go. And a world slowly waking up to the truth. That compassion is the only warmth strong enough to melt the cold. Because in the Arctic, against all odds, life found a way. But for thousands like her, time is melting away with the ice. The snow never really stops in the Arctic. It slows, softens, pauses for a breath. But it always returns. Just like the memories, just like the questions. Back at the sanctuary, another winter has passed. Hope, now larger, stronger, more confident, walks gracefully across the icy terrain built to resemble the home she barely remembers. She doesn't flinch at the wind anymore. She doesn't hide from the shadows. But there's still a place she goes sometimes, just before dusk. A small rise near the edge of the compound. It overlooks the frozen trees beyond the fencing. She sits there. Every evening. Still waiting. Still watching. Some of the newer staff think it's habit. Rachel knows better. She remembers, she whispers, standing beside the glass, her voice nearly lost in the hum of the snow. There's a photo hanging in the hallway near the visitor center now, a close-up of Hope's face. Her eyes focused. Come. A quiet intelligence there that most people miss unless they truly see. Below it is a single sentence. In a world growing colder, one act of kindness still burns bright. Somewhere far away, a retired Alaskan pilot keeps a small notebook on his shelf. The pages are worn. Some stained with old water damage. Others smeared from hands that were shaking, cold, or bleeding. On the last page is that same line. If she lives, that's all I need. And beside it, a tiny paw print in dried mud. How it got there, no one knows. But he says he found it near the wreckage. That's the thing about stories like this. They grow, they change, they whisper through the wind. But deep down, the truth always stays the same. Love leaves traces. Even in the snow. When Rachel speaks to school children, she starts with a simple question. Do you think one life matters? They always nod. Then she shows them the video, the little cub curled up in Daniel's coat, trembling, eyes fluttering with exhaustion but still open. They both could have given up, she says. But they didn't. And do you know why? The kids stare, leaning forward. Because sometimes all it takes is one heart choosing not to walk away. She lets the words hang. Then she shows them a satellite image, shrinking glaciers, melting shorelines. This is what we're up against, she says. But don't let it scare you. She puts her hand over her chest. Let it move you. Because this story, this real story, is more than a cub and a man. It's about you. About what you choose when no one's looking. About the moment you see something fragile, trembling, on the edge of life, and you do not turn away. That's what Daniel did. And though he's gone, what he gave still breathes. Still runs through the snow. Still stares through fences and remembers. He didn't need applause. He didn't need cameras or medals or praise. He just needed her to live. And she did. She does. So now it's your turn. Not to rescue polar bears, but maybe to pay attention, to care a little more, to waste a little less, to speak up for the creatures who can't speak for themselves. Because their world, our world, is shrinking. And kindness might be the only thing wide enough to hold on to it. So if this story touched you, share it, speak it, carry it. Because one fragile heartbeat can still echo across continents. And one silent choice can change everything. In the end, the snow will keep falling. The wind will keep howling. But maybe, just maybe, someone will step out into that cold and choose to warm the world again. One breath at a time. One soul at a time. One tiny heartbeat against a vast, melting world. Blueheart, if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Let's keep their memory alive and become a voice for the voiceless. Because sometimes, hope wears fur. And sometimes, heroes wear no name at all.